The upcoming U.S. elections will be a turning point in American history, one with global ramifications. What will be the impact of another 4 years of the Trump administration on the issues of race, public health, and foreign policy?
Keep America great.
I think it's quite obvious that another 4 years with the Trump administration is going to worsen race relations in the United States. It's gotten so bad over the first mandate that it's hard to imagine how much worse it can be. But this is actually building up to a moment in which the tensions that have been really staged and pursued actively by the administration, by the man himself, by President Trump, is essentially going to boil over a new period in which, combined with the frustration of the electorate that sort of did not want him to be there, that will see that all of these efforts, all of these marches, all of this sort of work at the level of all these communities did not produce any change. And on top of that, sort of the in-your-face kind of logic that we can expect of Mr. Trump as he's been actively doing that. But I think the deeper question is that what he has added to all of those sort of dynamics is a very explicit call to his own sort of population, supporters, about the race question. So these half-coded messages, dog whistling that we heard in the first 2 years, let's say, have been much more explicit now. Recently he spoke to this population of having good genes, which is a very explicit medical reference to sort of the theories of racism of the 1930s, the eugenists, for instance. So there's a sense there that it's almost explicitly calling for that tension. So quite clearly, going into a new phase, the combination of the frustration, the language used, the dynamics, and the fact that there's no more pressure for re-election is going to sort of let sort of a lot of much more space for negative dynamic when it comes to those relations.
So I think it's fair to say that President Trump has not been a friend to public health, and the consequences, if he is reelected, would be pretty dire for public health, both within the United States and globally. And I think we can see this by looking very quickly at least at a few different issues. One is, of course, the COVID pandemic in the United States, which continues to spiral out of control. The United States health system has many weaknesses, but it has a very, very strong public health agency, the CDC, which has unfortunately been crippled by the politicization and the criticism lobbied at it by the Trump administration. And so one thing that would change, or that would be, I think, continuing to be a disastrous situation would be, of course, if he were to be reelected, the CDC, I think, would continue its decline. And the pandemic would continue to spin out of control until a vaccine could be deployed, at least. The second issue is access to healthcare and the question of who is insured. And for the last 4 years, we have heard President Trump and the Republican Party arguing to change the current health insurance system, the Affordable Care Act. They want to repeal it, they want to weaken it, but there is no plan that's been put forward to actually replace it. And so if they are in fact successful in doing that, this would mean that tens of millions of Americans would lose access to health care. Last, if we look at the global level, we have seen two big challenges for global public health coming from the Trump administration. One is a real withdrawal from any kind of global leadership role, a withdrawal from the major funding role that the US government used to play, contributing to efforts to protect global public health. They've been pretty much missing in action in COVID. Second, of course, is the attacks on the World Health Organization and the decision to withdraw the U.S., which could legally happen only next year. I fully expect that if Trump were to be reelected, he would in fact carry through on that promise. So overall, it looks pretty bad for national and global public health if he were to be reelected.
In case Trump wins and gets the second term, very likely similar trends as we've seen in the past 4 years will continue, for better or worse. And so what it would probably mean in practice is that we would see, for example, this would be seen by the second Trump administration, the victory, as a confirmation that there is some kind of a backing for his sort of muscular type of America first, more nationalistic foreign policy. And so as a consequence, what it would likely mean is the continuation of objecting to multilateralism, objecting to possibly continuing to criticize international institutions and alliances like NATO. So one could imagine, for example, in terms of transatlantic relations, that in the worst case scenario, Trump would simply stop cooperating with NATO in the same way as he stopped cooperating with the WHO. Whether that would mean a formal end to the alliance is something else. But there certainly wouldn't be any improvement in some ways in the second term. It would also, however, I mean, given the situation is where it is in terms of the global sort of balance of power, the United States remains, of course, a very crucial actor around the world. So, emboldened by a victory, the Trump administration would see that they have the cards to play. And so they could push certain policies that they have. They could, for example, try to use this victory as, in some ways, push further the emerging conflict with China and try to maybe use the European uncertainties about American policy as a kind of a card to get Europeans backing as a price for maybe, keeping NATO going, and which is an important objective, I think, for many European powers, particularly in those closer to Russia. So you could see the sort of continuation of those trends. You would obviously see the continuation of all kinds of Twitter remarks that denigrate foreign leaders if, for whatever reason, you're likely to see that. You're likely to see the respect for the United States as a leader, as a leading global power, declines certainly among European populations and probably all around the globe. So it would not have a particularly positive impact either on the sort of traditional alliance relationship, traditional role that the United States has played in various multilateral organizations. Plus, there would be likely to be what is already the trend, which is much of the world finds the United States, in part because of the president and his style, as a very untrustworthy partner to play with.
As we celebrate tonight here in Columbus, especially those who voted us on Tuesday. This is the moment.